with a bit of background, industry opinions and so on. I wanted to talk a bit about myself, since I know that many of you do not really know who I am, where I come from and such. And I thought it's better if people know more, because it always cleans up a few of the weird conspiracies that exist in the industry about myself. And should make it obvious that I'm not that evil person that so many people think I am. So, as Theo already said, my name is Fabian Thylmann. I'm 33 years old, and I started in this industry in 1998 as the co-owner of a stats service called part1, which was actually later bought by Streamate. I don't know, a few years, like 6 or so years ago, I think. And after I left these partners that I did contract with, I started doing freelance coding work, because that's what I originally was. I was a programmer, basically. Freelance coding work in both North America and Europe. And had companies already when I was 18, and I learned a lot of things, mistakes, where I went bankrupt and all that kind of stuff that happens when you start new companies in the beginning and don't know what you're doing. And I learned a lot very early. I think that helped me quite a bit, actually. So between 2001 and 2002, I started working more and more with John Albright, which some of you might know as one of the owners of Too Much Media, the people that make Nats. And we actually, the way that Nats came to be is that in 2003, we wanted to launch our own affiliate program. And we went and got Mansion Productions. And I'm not sure if Oystein is here somewhere, since I'm seeing nothing. So I'm not sure if you know this, if he's here and is listening. The reason we started Nats and made quite a few problems for him, I think, in terms of competition, was because his head tech at the time didn't really want to help me change stuff on the join page. That's the ultimate reason. So I decided to write my own software, which I called Nats, which actually, because my nickname in the industry has always been Nathan, so Nats stood for, in the very beginning when I started coding it, for Nathan's Affiliate Tracking Software. Obviously that name is a bit stupid if you start selling an app as a company, so we changed it to Next Generation Affiliate Tracking Software, which sounded nicer. So after I coded that, which we coded for ourselves, a few people saw it, and they liked it a lot. So more and more people were asking us if we didn't want to sell the software itself, since it looked so nice, was so easy to use, was very configurable, had features that many didn't have. And so we decided to actually do that, and sold our first piece of software in 2003 to Duke Dollars, which still exists today. I'm not sure who here is familiar with them. But he's our first client, and is still using Nats today. After Nats, after working with them a few years, being one of the 3 partners in the company, I decided that I wanted to do something on my own. So I sold my share in the company and started doing consumer-centric sites in adult in Europe. And while doing that, I did 3 very strategic acquisitions. In like a 12-month period or so. Relatively small compared to the ones we're doing today. But I was able to do them in a very, very good way, very cheap, and using seller notes, because I could work with people or get people to sell that wanted to get out of the industry. On top of all of this, I was able to increase the profits the sites made by about 50% in 2 or 3 months. All that together meant that after a few years, or 1 or 2 years, I actually owned 3 assets debt-free in beginning of 2009. So when I had those in Europe working well, I decided expanding into the US, where I had worked before and knew people, made perfect sense. So I was looking for products which made sense in the US and what I could buy. Checked out a few things, talked to many people. And in January 2009, I talked to the owners of Pornhub. I'm using the first evil word, I'm sorry. Let me finish and then you can complain about the tools. The I talked to the owners of Pornhub because I wanted to buy Pornhub itself. Because I thought, starting with two things I don't have in the US, traffic and a site that sells, is going to be hard. So if I find one of the two, it makes it easier. So I decided Pornhub made sense. I talked to them, didn't work well. They didn't want to sell to me. Didn't really know me well. So it kind of fell apart relatively quickly. But in October of 2009, I talked to them again just to see if they're maybe willing now. People change, obviously, and their opinions change. So in 2009, they actually told me that they were looking to sell the whole group of companies, not just Pornhub. So Pornhub, Brazzers, Mofos, and what they owned back then. So I started talking to them a bit online, figured out an okay deal structure for me and for them. And then I asked my wife 2 days before Christmas 2009, a relatively stupid day to do that, I guess, but still, I asked her if she would be willing to come to Montreal, Canada with me to talk to them in person in more detail and see if we can get a deal done. So she agreed to that, thankfully. And we flew to Montreal, and it took me about 3 months. I told her we would stay 4 weeks. That didn't work out. We stayed 3 months. And after 3 months in March 2010, as many of you know, I acquired all assets of the Mansef group of companies. At the same time, I also bought webcams.com, which was a separate deal, which I made on the side at the same time. But it made sense with the stuff that Mansef had. I used those two deals to redo my whole company structure and setup and everything. And basically, in March 2010, what is Manwin today was born. So Manwin, that's one of these rumors or one of these conspiracy theories that exist in the industry, especially on GFY, that obviously it's such a similar name. I never bought Mansef, right, obviously, and I'm actually just a front person, and I'm just helping the owners hide. And to make it seem legit, I renamed the company to Manwin, which seems like a stupid idea since it's such a similar word. Why would that help? The reason actually why it's called Manwin is a relatively simple and maybe not funny but interesting one. There's a big office building that Manwin has in Montreal. And shortly before I bought the company, or bought the assets, they were already in negotiations with the city to allow them to put their company logo on the side of the building. Relatively complicated process, getting approval and so on, and you have to design the logo and get the thing built and so on. And that was all in the process already. So it was like 2-3 weeks before them putting a sign on the building. So I said, okay, look, I'm restructuring the whole company. And since I'm doing that, a new name makes sense. So what better to do than to find a name that fits the logo? So I decided, okay, name has to be an M, has to begin with M. So I went to Hunting Moon. We told them we're looking for a 4 to 6 letter domain.com with an M in the beginning. They gave us a list of 25 domains, many stupid ones that really didn't make any sense for our company. But manwin.com kind of worked. We were a bit struggling to really explain why Manwin, and there's no real reason behind it. It's really the only reason is that that domain was available and we could buy it. So we decided, let's call it Manwin, and that's it. So that's how we got to that name. And although that might sound like an excuse to some people on GFY, I'm sure they'll find a reason why this can't be the case. And they will continue asking questions, but that's how it is, and there's nothing more to it. So both Mansef and webcams.com were also seller notes. Mansef with relatively big upfront payment, and then payments over 16 months, relatively even payments each month, basically. And webcams.com was a special setup because I wanted to do the 2 deals at the same time. I couldn't really finance both at the same time. So I discussed with the owner of webcams, and he agreed to do a payment plan which doesn't start with a big sum in the beginning, but
ends with one at the end and would increase slowly so that I would have time to ramp up revenues and profits in both companies together, use synergies, and then basically be able to do the payments that I had to do for webcams.com. And then it was the big balloon payment at the very end. And obviously all these deals are secured, right? So if you don't do a payment, then they get assets back and whatnot. So because of those two deals at once, it was a relatively risky thing, since I knew that if one of them failed, it would likely pull down the other one. So if an installment payment wouldn't be made and someone would put me into default and I had to give the assets back, I would have a problem with the other one. Which is actually why the lawyers thought I was an idiot, because I agreed to these deals and it made no sense to them whatsoever. And that's no negative thing about lawyers, by the way, because some of my lawyers are sitting over there, so they don't think I'm an asshole or something. So the deal was very, very, very pro-seller side, okay? So they had lots of items in the contract that made sure that if there's even a slight mispayment or a delay of a payment more than 5 days, they can take everything back, although I already paid tons of money before. Which is usually not the way you do these deals, okay? Usually there's like a fixture period, which then gives some people some assets back and so on. But I knew back then already, I kind of know the people in the industry, I know how they think. There's a different breed of people than people in mainstream who have basically have MBAs and so on, so it's a bit different to talk to them and to explain to them why certain things have to be done in a certain way. And I knew perfectly well that that the deals would work, or at least I had a 95% chance of, in my opinion, that they worked, so the risk was okay for me. Getting these big assets all together just was too nice to not do at that time. So I did it, although my lawyers all said I should never do this, it's way too risky. I mentioned something twice already now, which I'm not sure if all of you know what it is. I said seller notes. Just so you guys understand, because it's just interesting, I think, to know, and it explains a bit how I do these deals and why I can do these deals. The most important thing in mergers and acquisitions is structuring payments and the deal terms and how things are paid when and so on. And although you hear, like in the media always, news reports that something was sold for, I don't know, $1.6 billion, that doesn't mean that Google goes, takes $1.6 billion in cash and gives it to them. It means that over a certain period of time, that is the maximum they can make. Okay, it just looks nicer being $1.6 billion obviously looks nicer than saying they get 10 million now, and if they outperform 500%, they get 1.6 billion at the end. So all of these deals are usually done at least somewhat with either earn-out systems, where it depends on how much money you actually make after buying the asset, or are done with so-called seller notes, which basically just means that instead of going to a bank, getting a credit and buying the asset, you get a credit from the owners of the asset that have it today. There's security put on the whole thing, and so that you can't really run away with it. Therefore, they kind of fund you the whole deal. This makes, obviously, deal making a lot easier, at least a lot easier than paying everything up front. But it also means that you have to be sure that people understand how security works, why they are safe in terms of payments, not going to them directly, but going over a period of a few months or 1 or 2 years. Of course, the more you can pay up front, the better it is, right? Because then they are more relaxed and they know, like for example, if you can already pay half, they are more relaxed and know that, okay, good, I'm relatively safe and I can go ahead and don't worry about the next payment. Since they had that much money at the beginning, they'll be okay with paying the rest. Because I knew that upfront payments were obviously better, I obviously tried to get as high as I could with upfront payments with Manwin. So in order to do that, since I knew that I would have a good sum of money by around March 2010 from profits from my European assets, basically, I I decided to start talking to a few funds and banks and to see if there's any possibility at all to get cash for deals like this. So I talked to a few funds, to private investors and so on. And they all said, look, the numbers look lovely. If these are real, it's great, but there's no proof here that these numbers are real, since obviously many of these companies don't have audited financials like a big stock company does. So it's harder to prove these numbers are correct. And securing the whole deals are obviously harder too, so it's not easy to convince a bank or something like that to fund such deals. So I sadly couldn't get that done, but in March, as I thought, everything was fine, so I could get the deal done with my own cash from my profits in Europe. So to lower risks in future acquisitions, and to make my M&A strategy, buying other assets basically, more successful, I decided to talk to a few banks again after I acquired Manwin. And I did that together with the management team in Montreal and with a group of consultants from Canada also, from a big consulting firm. And because they were very sure that if we could make audited financials, at least for a good period of time, that it should be relatively simple. Simple sounds easy, but it should be doable to get funding for deals like this, especially for something like Playboy, which I already had in the works back then. So it took us about 10 months to find a lender that would be willing to give us cash. It took a lot of hard work, a lot of learning, deal making, and financial security and legal security. But in April 2011, we managed to secure a loan, a clean loan, no investors, nothing, a loan from a Wall Street fund with 9 figures. I'm not going to tell you the number, don't ask, please, but it's 9 figures, so it's quite big. And this all was based on plans we had for the next 2 or so years in terms of acquisitions and what our targets would be. So that funding helped to one, pay down the end of the seller notes for Mansef and webcams, but it also helped with deals like Spankwire, with YouPorn, with Twisties, Playboy, and as probably most of you have heard, Digital Playground yesterday, or officially announced today. Although Mike South has posted on his blog that it was done a few weeks ago, or actually months ago, people thought, we were actually, when he first reported it, we weren't even talking about this, and deals always take time, and we did finally sign yesterday, so it's all good. We signed a few in one of the bars in the casino, by the way, so you could have actually seen it, but no one actually cared, I guess. So, as an example, because of all this funding from lenders, obviously they need to be sure that everything's clean and everything is in the right buckets and everything is safe. And with my company structure also, these deals are quite intensive. In this one, for example, I had to sign, I think, somewhere around 45 company resolutions and agreements, internal ones for my company structure, to be able to even sign the Digital Playground contract. Okay? It's complicated stuff and quite annoying and very, very expensive. And that's the flip side of being able to get a loan. But it's a necessary evil, I guess, and it teaches you a lot, I guess, and makes you understand why certain security things are good and such. So that's about myself. A bit of an intro, who I am, how I got to where I am today. I hope that you guys are happy that I'm quite open, and I understand